You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. I'm thrilled to have on Jordan Wilson with us today. Jordan has made an incredible journey from drug addiction to becoming the recovery director at Friends of Sinners, a men's faith-based recovery program in Owensboro, Kentucky. Today, he'll share some insights about his personal story, and also we're going to talk about what makes sobriety stick for men. Welcome to the show, Jordan.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited.
I'm so thrilled to have you on. You know, I came across a news article talking about you and talking about your basic transformation from somebody who was in and out of jail, drug addict, notorious for using drugs, and now running this very successful religious and faith-based recovery center. And I thought this was so interesting. And, you know, I think so many men are trying to figure out in sobriety how to do what you've done, how to really make sobriety stick. So welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and about how you got here?
Yeah, so I'm from a small town in Western Kentucky, and I was raised in a God-fearing household. I had great parents. They stayed married up until I was an adult. And I started partying as a teenager. You know, I kind of stopped wanting to do the church thing that my parents had me doing, and wanted to just chase women and popularity and drinking and smoking weed and things like that. But I became, during this process, I became addicted to narcotic pain pills. I was, I don't want to say sheltered, but I was raised ignorant of drugs. I didn't know anything about them. And I thought, you know, as becoming a young man, I was very athletic. I lifted weights. People knew me and my family. I never thought that I could become addicted to drugs. But it was happening uh, right right before me. It was happening to me, and I didn't even know. I thought I could quit anytime I want. I just don't want to. I'm having fun, until it wasn't fun anymore, right? And once I realized I was physically addicted to painkillers, my life really took a turn. The party was basically over. It wasn't fun anymore. It started getting very criminal. And before long, you know, uh, I'm finished with high school and college and trying to live life, and pay my bills while addicted to painkillers. Um, I lose my job because of my addiction and resorted to full-time drug dealing because, you know, it's like a slow, steady fail, right? And that's what was happening to me. And yeah, I became a full-time drug dealer, manufacturer of other drugs. Because when you're in that world, you meet other people who do other things, and so my life is just consumed with you know, narcotics. And eventually, what started my road to recovery is me getting busted 10 years ago, March of 2014. That's what started the process for me.
You know, it's interesting that you talk about getting into the drug business, because I think right now a lot of people are seeing the homeless situation. They're seeing addicts on the streets of major cities, even in suburbs that were never there before. They know somebody who's gotten sucked up into this, and they think it's literally a moral and crime issue. And although there is some morality in that, obviously, and we'll talk about that, uh, but a lot of it is just a physical dependency on trying to be able to kind of fuel this. So let's go to this time when you're busted. You're in handcuffs. You're probably in lockup, awaiting your fate.
Right.
What was the thing that really turned it around for you, Jordan? Like, what was the moment where you said, you know what? Maybe there is a possibility that I could get sober.
Right. So, you know, detoxing was just horrific. You know, I was detoxing from 20 painkillers a day. I was detoxing from crystal meth, from spice, from benzodiazepine, alcohol. I mean, you name it. Like I was a mess, so sick. And it was my first time being sober. And I thought, you know, I was just so naive. I thought that it was over, right? I thought, hey, I'm detoxed now, I'm good. But I didn't know that I was basically riding that pink cloud that they talk about. And I fell through the pink cloud after I was incarcerated, after I went to rehab. I made it a few months into the program that I was in before I had relapsed. And so I didn't realize the mental obsession that I had had with drugs, you know, and really, you know, it was an underlying issue, right? Typically, people use drugs as a band aid for a bigger issue. And so that's what I was doing. You know, I had some traumas that I hadn't dealt with and some insecurities I hadn't dealt with, which I was using narcotics as a way to take away that pain and take away the stress of life. But honestly, I was kicked out of rehab. I went back to jail because I wanted to get sober, but I wasn't all in, right? You know, I was raised to believe in God, and I kind of walked away from that faith and was doubting if there was a God and all these things until March 27th, 2016. My dad asked me to come to church. And, you know, at this point, I'm homeless. I was just kicked out of where I was living. I was a mess. It was horrible. And I told him no. I said, I don't want to go. You know, it's Easter. Will you come for Easter? And, you know, of course, us as Americans, we celebrate the resurrection of Christ on Easter Sunday. And I said, no, I'm sick. And then my dad said, well, son, it's my birthday. Will you go to church with me on Easter Sunday for my birthday? And so finally I said, okay, I'll go. I'll be sick because I was detoxing, didn't have any more drugs. I was sick as a dog. And I went to church with my dad. And apparently the pastor said something that day that I needed to hear. He said, if you have been living without purpose, you can come to this altar, give your life to Jesus, and you'll have purpose. And that was something, man, that I had needed to hear for a decade because I was trying to fill my life with anything to make me feel satisfied, right? I thought that going to the gym and being able to bench press and squat a certain amount of weight would make me happy. And I did that and it didn't make me happy. I had beautiful women in my life that wanted to date me and marry me. That didn't satisfy me. I owned a home. I had money and all of these things. And I felt no purpose in my life. And, and so when he said that, it was as if an out of body experience. And so I went to the altar and I decided I was going to truly learn about Jesus for myself, this Jesus of the Bible. I was going to read it. I was going to discover who he was and why people still follow him 2,000 years later. And my life changed forever that day, March 27th, 2016. That's my sobriety day. I gave my life to Christ that day, and I never used drugs. That was my aha moment.
You know, I love what you're talking about with purpose. And, you know, one of the things, Jordan, that I talk about is that when I first got sober, it was through a 12-step program. And I have to tell you, like, when I heard the words powerlessness and unmanageability, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to find my purpose and be able to let go of powerlessness and unmanageability. Like, that's one of the worst things that you could tell Damon Frank. Like, I'll do anything but that, right? Like, it was bad enough that I realized that I couldn't drink anymore. But now you're telling me that I'm going to have zero control, basically. And, you know, my life is totally unmanageable. And I've got to admit to that. I did not see, you know, and I believe firmly that men need a purpose. You know, one of the issues, right, Jordan, you might agree with me. Obviously you do, because you've been through this and you're working with men day to day. If men don't have a purpose and a goal, it's very tough for men. And I didn't see that link. How in the heck am I going to get from admitting I'm powerless and my life's unmanageable to a purpose and then being able to thrive in that? How are you able to get past that and really let go and surrender?
Right. So I started actually reading the Bible for myself as an adult and able to kind of make up my own mind as to what it said. And I started believing what the Bible said about me as an individual, is that I was fearfully and wonderfully made, and that God loved me. And I started believing it because for so long I haven't loved me. I didn't think I was fearfully and wonderfully made. I thought that I was a talentless, you know, I thought that I was useless. I didn't think that I was good for the world. And then I started using my outlook on myself. And once I did that, everything started to change for me. I started feeling purpose that, okay, there is a God, that he loves me. He kept me alive, right? Because if you read my book, you'll see there are several circumstances in my life where I should have died. Guns pulled on me, overdoses, all kinds of things. And he kept me alive. And so my work ethic changed, right? I went to this program, a 12-step program, that a program that worked 12 steps. And I started learning about addiction. And you know what I learned? I learned that I was no match for addiction. I always thought that I was too tough and too bullheaded, uh, but I'm not, right. Like I'm helpless to the addiction, so I needed something divine to help me. And once I realized, hey, like I'm not fighting this alone, right? Like I know that God loves me, and I started seeing the people that were really in my corner, my family, and the people that I had met in the recovery world, that I wasn't fighting this alone. And so my mind started to change, and once my mind started to change, everything started to change. My work ethic, my focus, my drive, you name it.
You know, I like how you put that. One of the things that I found was interesting, Jordan, is that when I had a hard time, because somebody told me very early on in recovery, it's like, well, if God loves you so much, how come you're an alcoholic in your 20s with no future, right? Like, and that was a good question for me. And I couldn't really see God working in my life. But what happened to me is I started to see God working in other people's lives. And then the question started to arise, Jordan. Well, if I can identify God working in their life and I can see it, I could see that transformation. I could see how it's working for them. If I can identify that, then obviously it's working in my life too. I'll be able to start seeing it in my life. And that little shift was big for me because I couldn't see it in my life. I couldn't, that's just the reality of it, because I was really unable to let go. But when I started seeing it working with other people, that's really when it started to break through. I got to ask you this, Jordan, working with men who come in, they're not in a good place financially, spiritually, their health. You're seeing people who are wrecked, basically.
Right.
What do you think is the big thing, if you were to look at yourself and everyone else that you work with, that the first big shift that people have to really make sobriety stick?
Yeah, I think it's just realizing that you're not tough enough as a man, right? Or as an individual to do it your own way, right? That is so huge. We see people all the time, and this may be their 10th time in a rehab, and their answers are usually always the same, like, man, I thought I had it, or I thought I could do it on my own, and you just can't. And that's really hard for men to do. It's hard for myself, right? We're men. We want to be able to handle stuff and fight the battle and win, but this is a different kind of war, right? And realizing that you are no match for the chemicals in a substance, whether it's alcohol or narcotics, you're no match. Once you realize that you need help, like seriously, that you can't do it on your own, that you need divine help, you need a army of people around you, you need advice, you need the steps, you need all of these things to get there. So I think that once a man can humble himself and say, okay, I surrender, right? Like I need help. That's when the process of healing, I think, really starts.
I so agree with you. One of the things, if I work with somebody in a 12-step program or anything, it's one of the things that they ask me, like, Damien, how'd you stay sober 30 years? And I said, well, I start every day giving up, understanding that battle that I fought is not only BS. It's not one I want to fight. It's not one that I can win. It's not one that I want to win. That's the other thing. It's like drinking doesn't work for me, right? Like I have to admit the fact that I am different in that sense. I'm never going to be able to drink, right? Like I think really understanding that you've had defeat, especially as a man, and then being able to say, like, look, this is a fight I lost, is important, because I think that opens up the ability to create something new. Without that, you're stuck there trying to fight that same battle over and over. And I see that a lot with men. How did you get out of this? Like, I know you're an author, you wrote a book, and you just sent me one, and I'm so excited. I'm going to put a link, guys, in the show notes so everybody can order that. What was the journey from, okay, I'm sober now, I've turned my life over to Christ, I'm pursuing sobriety, to now really doing this day to day for people?
Yeah, it's kind of like you said, man. I wake up every day and I surrender, right? My book is called Jesus Greater Than Drugs, the only war won by surrender, right? Like that's how you win this war, is through surrender. And so I wake up every day, I acknowledge God, I acknowledge my need for Him. And honestly, that's what I've done for 8 years. Every single day, every day I get alone time with God, right? In the beginning of my recovery, when I was in treatment center, it made most sense for me to do it in the mornings. Well, now that I have a wife and 2 kids, it makes most sense for me to do it at night once my family's asleep. But every day, 7 days of the week, I get private time with me and my higher power that I like to call Jesus Christ. And so I'll pray and I'll read the word. But then also, I have stayed on a very structured schedule my entire sobriety. While I was in rehab, I'd wake up, I'd do my chores, I would eat breakfast, I would spend time with the Lord, I would do everything that I was required to at the facility. Then I'd go to work, and then I'd go back and I'd do whatever I had to do. And honestly, having a structured schedule for myself has been so beneficial. Like we have lived sporadic, impulsive lives for so long. We just did what we wanted when we wanted, and just kind of just skated by to survive. But now I'm very structured, right? I've got a routine, and yeah, man, I stay busy in all positive ways, and then I allow myself rest. So everything that I do on a day-to-day basis is very planned out.
I love that. I think structure is, I think when we're looking at that, if only I could get that structure going and still use, right? Like, it's
Right.
that juggling back and forth. And you realize when you're sober that just doing the small little things work. Guys, I have to ask everybody, if you're listening on the podcast, head over to recoveredlife.tv. We put a poll in there that you can vote. What do you think is the most important for achieving long-term sobriety for men? Definitely go ahead and take that vote there. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it. Jordan, let's move to Friends of Sinners here a little bit. This is an amazing institution. Tell us a little bit where you're at. What is this Friends of Sinners about? And why are you having such great success there? How are you doing that?
Yes. So Friends of Sinners was established in 2009. So we're 15 years old. Our founder is in long-term recovery himself. He gave his life to Christ while he was in prison for manufacturing and distributing narcotics. And when he came out of prison, he was sent to a secular program. And, he did well, he thrived, but he thought, man, like he thought people need a spiritual side of things. People need a relationship with Jesus. So he founded Friends of Sinners, which is, the name is driven from the Bible, right? Like the religious leaders called Jesus a friend of sinners to shame him, but it was honestly to Jesus's glory, because Jesus attracted sinners, and when sinners came to Jesus, we didn't remain sinners. So we were established as a Christ-centered residential treatment program for men. 2 years later, we added women, so now we treat both men and women at separate locations. Our clients will live with us for 12 months. They'll work the steps of Narcotics and or Alcoholics Anonymous. They attend Celebrate Recovery, learn life skills, work ethic. We allow them to work after the first month of treatment. We help them with their court appointments. They have preventive drug testing. We'll help them get their GED, even put them back in college. They get fully medically assessed if they need medicine to help them. We understand that many people are dual diagnosed, whether it's ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenia. We understand that that's kind of just a part of the struggle. So it's a very holistic approach to treatment. But our goal is not just sobriety. Our goal is to introduce our clients to Jesus, and we believe that sobriety will be a byproduct of that. So we've been doing well. I've been the development director here for 5 years. So my focus really is marketing, fundraising. We don't bill insurance, which is unheard of, really. when it comes to residential treatment because we know how much money there is in it. However, we've seen firsthand what insurance providers can do to a Christ-centered aspect of a program, and they can take Christ out. So we don't bill insurance whatsoever. We're able to do what we do through monthly donors, grants, and fundraisers.
I love your approach, and there's a couple of institutions like this in Los Angeles as well. And I love your approach because you're right about this whole insurancization, I guess you would call it, of the recovery business, right? And we talk about that on the Recovered Life show. What I really love about Friends of Sinners is that, like, our goal here in Recovered Life is not for people just to get sober. It's for people to have their best recovered life, right?
Mhm.
And I think a spiritual journey, and sometimes for some people that's religion. You know, I like we were talking earlier, I said, you know, uh, a lot of the people that I've worked with over my time sober started out totally as atheists or agnostics and then ended up kind of becoming very religious, right? Like, so I think it's an evolution, and I think that you guys are that you guys set that up for people to win at the very beginning. I think is super important. What's the future for you? What do you think the future is, especially for men's recovery, Jordan? Like you're working in this now. You're looking on the streets. I'm sure in your town, you've got fentanyl. You've got it's worse than ever, probably, right? I know here in Los Angeles, that's all I hear from people in and out of recovery is it's worse than ever. What do you think the future of recovery, especially for men, is going to be in the upcoming years here?
Well, I hate to say it, man, but fentanyl is wiping out an entire generation. I keep a running list on my phone that's just growing and growing with all the friends and acquaintances that I've had that have passed away due to drugs, one fashion or another, whether it's liver failure, murder, or overdose. Um, it's not looking good, to tell you the truth, man. The numbers they're just staggering. We've reached over 100,000 overdose deaths in the past 12 months. But there is hope, right? There is hope. And I think that as long as we in the recovery world continue to stand out and tell our stories, that it will draw more people in. So I'm trusting in God, man, that a great revival is going to happen. People's going to be set free and saved in Jesus' name. But as it sits right now, the numbers are bad, right? And they
Yeah.
seem to be rising. But I just think that that's where we have to stand up, right? I tell people all the time, we have to tell our stories. We have to share. If you're a year sober, 10 years sober, tell your story because it may be the next person's survival guide. And also, when
Absolutely.
we
You know what? No, I'm going to
go
say
ahead,
you're
go ahead.
absolutely right about that. One of the things that I always say is, like, I go around the streets of Los Angeles here, even go in the store, and I see this, right? Trank, fentanyl, all this new stuff that's out on the street, and alcohol still the worst, which was my drug of choice, still killing a ton of people, especially since COVID. And I always have to remind myself, look at me, look at you, Jordan, look at numerous friends that I have. I just got a wedding invitation from somebody that I saw come in almost 10 years ago, came in that could not get sober, is now sober, getting married, all this stuff. So it's possible that everyone can recover. It is possible. And I know it's frustrating sometimes, but it is possible that we could have massive recovery when people start to wake up. And I think that spiritual path, that path to God, ultimately is what people are waking up to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what did it for me, man. Like I tried every way to get sober, man. I was locked up for a long time, right? And still was a slave to the sin. I was a slave to the addiction. I did mat therapy. I did in-house treatment, IOP, mandatory drug screens, court ordered treatment. Nothing worked until I decided, I'm going to follow Jesus, until I decided that there was a God that loved me. So I think that the faith aspect is just key in someone maintaining sobriety.
Jordan, this has been an amazing episode. I want to, final thoughts here. If somebody's listening to this, especially a guy or so, maybe, it's a family member and they have a man in their life that's really struggling and there seems no hope. What would be your message to them about getting sober, about making the attempt to get sober?
Yes. So if you have a family member that's struggling, being transparent with them, right? Telling them how it makes you feel and what it's truly doing to them. Because when someone's in addiction, they can't see for themselves. They can't think clearly for themselves. So being transparent. And then also, I am the product of prayer, right? Like my family prayed for me for a long time and they never gave up. And so when I was finally ready, they were able to help me get into a program. So I just think being yourself, being available, being transparent, loving them in a way that's not going to harm them, like enabling them. You got to be very, very careful not to enable them. But there are ways to help.
Absolutely. Jordan, this has been just such a great episode. Thank you so much for coming on the Recovered Life Show. We definitely want to have you back to talk more about you and your story. Thanks so much for coming on today.
My pleasure.
Hey, if you like this episode, think about supporting us by becoming a Recovered Life Plus member. At Recovered Life TV, we're not just delivering premium recovery resources, we're empowering you with the knowledge and tools that make a real difference in the quality of your recovery. By subscribing, you gain access to ad-free content, expert insights, exclusive video and audio segments, special projects, plus so much more, all while supporting our mission to spread the recovery message far and wide. Whether you're seeking to deepen your understanding or stay updated on the latest addiction and mental health recovery trends, Recovered Life Plus is for you. Subscribe now and start living your best recovered life. Just go to recoveredlife.tv and become a Plus member today.